You think blood ties give you a free ride forever, but I've seen through your act for years. Dad trusted you with too much, and now it's time to cut the dead weight before the deal closes. Stay out of this one, or I'll make sure the entire enclave sees you for the liability you are. Hi, my name is Lauren Whitaker. I am 34 years old. The words landed like a quiet blade in the sleek conference room, perched on the hillside above Berkeley, California. My older brother, Ryan Whitaker, had just finished speaking them across the long oak table, while the rest of us sat frozen under the soft overhead lights. This was supposed to be a routine final walkthrough for the family real estate development deal that would secure our company's future in the affluent hillside enclave where we all lived. Instead, it became the moment everything I had quietly held together for the last 4 years started to crack open in front of witnesses. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, the way I had trained myself to do in boardrooms and negotiations. No flinch, no sharp intake of breath. Just the slow, measured breath of someone who had learned long ago that showing reaction only gave the other person more power. My father, Edward Whitaker, sat at the head of the table, eyes fixed on the documents in front of him, saying nothing. That silence was the part that cut deepest, but I filed it away for later. Right now, the deal mattered more than the sting. We were in the final stages of closing on a major hillside property acquisition that would expand our family company's portfolio. Ryan had been positioning himself as the driving force, the one with the vision and the contacts. He had spent the last several months convincing our father that I was the weak link, the one whose input only slowed things down. What neither of them knew yet was that I had been the one quietly funding the shortfalls, using my own private investment firm to keep the company afloat after my father's disastrous decisions nearly sank us. Blood ties had masked the truth for a long time. I let it stay masked because I still believed somewhere in the back of my mind that family loyalty meant something. The meeting continued with that brittle politeness that hides knives. Ryan leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the table edge. Lauren, you've been quiet. Again, if you don't have anything constructive to add, maybe it's best if you sit this one out entirely. His tone was light, almost conversational, but the sarcasm underneath was unmistakable. It was the same tone he had used since we were kids, the older brother who always knew how to make me feel 2 steps behind. I met his gaze steadily. I reviewed the numbers last night. There's a discrepancy in the escrow timeline that could delay closing by weeks if we don't address it now. I slid a single printed page across the table. It was factual, precise, and based on the insider memo I had received from my trusted colleague, Mia Kensington, earlier that morning. Mia worked as our external compliance advisor. She had flagged the issue and asked me point blank why I was still letting my brother steer the ship when the numbers showed he was steering it straight into risk. Ryan barely glanced at the page before sliding it back. See? This is exactly what I mean. Always nitpicking, never contributing the big picture. Dad, you agree we need to streamline this. He turned to our father, expecting the usual quiet nod of support. My father cleared his throat, but still wouldn't look at me. Ryan's been handling the day-to-day. Maybe it's time we let him run point on the final push. That was the first real betrayal I felt in the room. Not the public jab from my brother, but the quiet complicity from the man who had once told me I was the steady one in the family. I felt the familiar cold detachment settle over me like a second skin. No anger flared, no tears threatened, just the clear, precise recognition that the trust I had extended was being used as a weapon. The meeting dragged on for another 40 minutes, with Ryan dominating every discussion, cutting off my comments with practiced ease. When it finally wrapped, he stood up, gathering his laptop and papers. I'll ride back to the main office with Dad. We have some loose ends to tie up. Lauren, you can handle the follow-up emails from here, right? He didn't wait for an answer. He and my father walked out together, leaving me alone at the table. I sat there for a long moment, the hillside view stretching out beyond the windows, but I didn't really see it. My phone buzzed. It was Mia. Her text was short. That memo I sent you this morning, Ryan saw a copy. He's pushing your father to sideline you completely before the closing. Are you sure you still want to protect them? I stared at the screen. The question landed harder than Ryan's earlier words. Mia had been with me through every late night review and every quiet bailout I had made. She was the one person outside the family who knew the full scope of what I had done to keep the company alive. And now she was questioning my loyalty, not to the business, but to people who clearly didn't deserve it. I typed back a single line, "I'm handling it." But even as I sent it, a small cold voice inside me wondered if handling it still made sense. The next 2 days passed in a blur of emails and quiet preparations. Ryan's campaign to push me out gained momentum. He started copying my father on every communication, subtly framing my contributions as obstacles. One afternoon, he even forgot to include me on a critical call with the buyers, then later claimed it was an oversight when I confronted him in the office hallway. "You're reading too much into things," he said with that familiar half smile. "Blood makes us family, but business is business. Dad and I are just trying to protect what we've built." I didn't argue. I simply nodded and walked away, already pulling the threads on the insider memo Mia had referenced. What Ryan didn't know was that the memo contained more than just compliance notes. It contained the paper trail of the quiet loans and guarantees I had made through my firm to keep the company solvent. If it leaked at the wrong moment, it would expose everything. That evening, I met Mia at a small cafe just outside the enclave. She was waiting at a corner table, her expression tight. "Lauren, I like you. I respect what you've done for them. But this pattern, it's not sustainable. Your brother is actively undermining you, and your father is letting it happen. At some point, you have to ask yourself if protecting them is still loyalty or just habit." Her words hung between us. I took a slow sip of my coffee, keeping my voice even. "I've been asking myself that for weeks." She leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time to stop asking and start acting." That memo I flagged. If Ryan pushes any harder, it could surface publicly during the closing. The buyers are already nervous about internal stability. One leak and the whole deal could collapse. I felt the first real shift inside me. Then not dramatic, not emotional, just a quiet recalibration. The same cold detachment that had carried me through years of silent support was now turning outward. I thanked Mia for her candor and left the cafe with the weight of a decision I hadn't fully voiced yet. Back at my own place in the enclave, I reviewed the documents again. The truth was simple and brutal. I owned the majority stake in the holding company that had kept everything afloat. My father had signed over control years ago during the worst of his financial troubles, trusting me to fix what he had broken. Ryan knew none of this. He still believed I was the younger sister living off family goodwill, contributing nothing while he carried the load. The next morning brought the second escalation. Ryan called an emergency meeting at the company offices, claiming new concerns about the deal. When I arrived, the room was already full. My father was there along with Rebecca Lang, our corporate attorney, who had been brought in to finalize paperwork. Ryan didn't waste time. "We need to restructure the signatories for the closing. Lauren, your involvement has created unnecessary complications. Dad and I think it's best if you step back completely." Rebecca glanced at me, her expression carefully neutral. She had seen the full ownership documents weeks ago when I quietly updated her on the structure. She knew the truth, but she said nothing, waiting for me to speak. My father shifted in his chair, but remained silent. I felt the familiar cold settle deeper. No raised voice, no accusation. Just the poised, composed response I had practiced in my own mind for months. "If that's how you want to proceed, I won't stand in the way of the deal." Ryan looked almost disappointed that I hadn't fought back. He smiled thinly. "Good. We'll handle it from here." As the meeting broke up, Rebecca lingered. She caught my arm in the hallway, voice low. "Lauren, the memo Ryan keeps referencing. If it leaks now, it won't just affect the deal. It will expose the full ownership chain. Your brother is playing with fire he doesn't understand." I met her eyes. Then maybe it's time the fire showed him exactly who's been holding the match. She searched my face for a moment, then nodded once. The question in her eyes was the same one Mia had asked, How long was I willing to protect people who saw me as dead weight? I left the office without another word. The hillside drive home wound through the enclave's quiet streets, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of protecting the family name. I felt the clean, detached clarity of someone finally ready to let the truth do its own work. But the real shift came that evening when my phone lit up with a message from Rebecca. She had forwarded me a copy of an internal email Ryan had sent to my father just hours earlier. The subject line was simple final steps to remove Lauren from all decision-making. Inside was the beginning of the memo leak I had been waiting for. Ryan had attached documents he believed proved I was a risk. What he didn't realize was that those same documents, once read in full context, proved the opposite. I stared at the screen, the cold detachment hardening into something sharper. The trap wasn't mine to spring yet, but the pieces were falling exactly where they needed to be. The email from Rebecca sat there on my screen, every line spelling out exactly how my older brother intended to push me aside before the deal closed. I read it once, then set the phone down without a second glance. No surge of anger, no racing heart. Just the same cold, detached clarity that had carried me through years of quietly fixing what my father and my older brother kept breaking. If Ryan wanted to play this game with insider memos and private emails, I would let the pieces move exactly as they were meant to. The following morning, my older brother called another emergency session at the company offices overlooking the enclave's winding hillside roads. This time, he made sure the room was packed. Thomas Hale, one of our largest outside investors and a longtime fixture in the Berkeley business circle, sat at the far end of the table. Rebecca was already there, her face carefully blank. My father arrived last, taking his usual seat at the head without meeting my eyes. My older brother wasted no time. "Thomas, we appreciate you making time on short notice," my older brother said, leaning forward with that practiced smile he reserved for people he needed on his side. "We're finalizing the signatories today, so there are no surprises when we close next week. Lauren's been helpful in the past, but her involvement at this stage is creating unnecessary friction. Dad and I feel it's cleaner if we streamline the structure." Thomas Hale glanced my way, polite but clearly assessing. He had put significant capital into the project based on the stability my older brother had promised. I was under the impression the Whitaker family operated as a unit, he said evenly. "Is there some internal issue I should know about before we move forward?" My older brother jumped in before I could speak. "Nothing that can't be managed. Lauren tends to overanalyze every detail. It slows momentum. We're protecting the deal here, Thomas. Blood ties only go so far when real money is on the line." I kept my posture straight, voice level. "The memo you referenced yesterday, Ryan actually supports keeping the current structure intact. The compliance flags you highlighted were resolved months ago by the funding I arranged through my own channels." Rebecca shifted slightly in her seat but said nothing. She had seen the full ownership documents. She knew precisely who had kept the company solvent. My father cleared his throat. "Ryan's been the face of this project in the enclave. People trust his lead. Maybe it's best we let him finish what he started." The words landed with quiet finality. Thomas Hale nodded slowly, as if the matter were already decided. My older brother looked satisfied, the kind of satisfaction that comes from believing you have finally cornered the weak link. I simply made a single note on the legal pad in front of me and waited for the meeting to end. Another mini cliffhanger in a long line of them the investor now had doubt planted, and my older brother had just gained another ally without realizing the ground beneath him was shifting. Later that afternoon, my father asked me to stay behind. The others had filed out, leaving the two of us in the quiet conference room. He closed the door, something he rarely did. For a moment, he just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor the way he had in the big meeting earlier. "Lauren," he began, voice low, "I know you've been caring more than anyone realizes. I've known for a while now about the quiet loans, the guarantees you made through your firm. I saw the transfers. I waited detached, letting the silence stretch." He continued, the admissions spilling out like something he had rehearsed, but never quite wanted to say aloud. "I let Ryan believe he was the one holding everything together. It was easier that way. kept the peace in the family. He needed to feel like the one in charge well, after my mistakes. I thought if I gave him the spotlight, it would keep him motivated. I never meant for it to go this far, but blood ties, they make you do things you wouldn't otherwise. The confession hung between us. My father had known the truth for years and had chosen to let my older brother operate under a comfortable lie. He had watched me pour my own resources into saving the company while allowing my older brother to treat me as dead weight. It was the mid-story twist I had half expected, yet still felt like another precise cut. Not devastating, just confirming what the cold detachment had already accepted. I met his eyes without blinking. Actions prove real loyalty, Dad, not words after the fact. He flinched but didn't argue. Just, don't rock the boat right now. The deal is too important for all of us. I left the room without another word. The conversation had clarified everything. Blood ties had masked the truth long enough. That evening, Mia called me at home. She didn't bother with small talk. Lauren, I heard about today's meeting. Thomas Hale is already emailing the group asking for more transparency on ownership. Your brother is spinning it as your fault. I'm asking you again, how long are you going to keep protecting people who keep proving they don't deserve it? This isn't loyalty anymore. It's just delaying the inevitable. Her voice carried real concern, the kind that comes from watching someone choose the wrong fight for too long. I appreciated it in the detached way I appreciated facts. I'm handling it, Mia. The memo leak is already in motion. I just need one more piece to fall. She sighed. You always say that, but every time you give them another chance, they take more. At some point, you have to choose yourself. I ended the call with the same even tone I had used all day. The conversation left another small cliffhanger in the air. Mia's patience was wearing thin, and the Enclave's business network was starting to whisper. One more public exposure, and the entire deal could swing wildly. The next morning, my older brother sent a group text announcing a final sign-off meeting for the following afternoon. All key parties required, he wrote. We'll be formalizing the new structure then. No exceptions. Attached was an updated agenda that listed me only as observer. Thomas Hale had already confirmed he would attend in person. Rebecca had replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. My father had forwarded the message without comment. I read the text twice, then set my phone down on the kitchen counter. The cold detachment had hardened into something final now. My older brother was walking straight into the moment where the insider memo would do its work. He still believed he was in control. He still believed blood would protect him. But I had already forwarded the full unredacted documents to the one person whose opinion mattered most in the Enclave's tight-knit business community. Elena Vargas, the respected network coordinator who connected most of the Hillside investors, had received everything an hour earlier. She had not replied yet, but I knew she was reading. The final meeting was less than 24 hours away. My older brother thought he was about to deliver the decisive blow. What he didn't know was that the complaint I had quietly prepared, the one tying his deceptive handling of the memo directly to potential deal fallout, was already poised to land the moment he tried to remove me publicly. I stood in my quiet living room looking out over the enclave without really seeing it. The pieces were aligned. The trap was no longer waiting to be sprung. It was simply waiting for my older brother to step fully inside. The final meeting arrived the next afternoon in the same sleek conference room perched on the hillside. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows as the key players gathered around the long oak table. My older brother had arranged everything with his usual precision, positioning himself at the center like the man who had already won. My father sat to his right, silent as ever. Thomas Hale was there, along with Marcus Reed, the buyer representative, who had flown in from San Francisco to sign off on the final terms. Rebecca Lang reviewed her notes with professional calm. And Elena Vargas, the network coordinator, whose quiet influence shaped half the deals in the enclave, had accepted the last-minute invitation my older brother had sent, thinking it would lend him credibility. I arrived exactly on time and took the seat farthest from the head of the table. No one spoke to me directly. My older brother opened the meeting with the same confident tone he had used for months. We're here to finalize the signatory changes and lock in the closing schedule. After careful review, Dad and I have decided to streamline the structure. Lauren will step into an observer role moving forward. It keeps things efficient and protects the deal from any last-minute complications. Marcus Reed raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Thomas Hale leaned back, waiting. Elena Vargas simply folded her hands on the table, her expression unreadable. My older brother continued sliding a fresh set of documents across the table. These revised agreements remove any unnecessary layers. The memo we flagged earlier makes it clear Lauren's input has introduced risks we can't afford at this stage. We're protecting the family company here. Blood ties matter, but business demands clear leadership. He looked straight at me, then expecting the same quiet compliance I had given him for years. The room waited. I met his gaze with the same cold detachment that had become my steady companion. Before I could respond, Elena Vargas cleared her throat. She reached into her leather folder and produced a single printed page, the full unredacted insider memo I had forwarded to her the night before. Actually, she said, her voice measured and professional, I received this memo in full context late yesterday. It appears the compliance flags Ryan highlighted were not only resolved, but were addressed through funding guarantees provided by Lauren's private investment firm. The paper trail shows she has been the primary stabilizer for the company's shortfalls over the past 4 years. Removing her from decision-making at this point would trigger immediate disclosure requirements to all investors and could jeopardize the entire closing. The silence that followed was absolute. My older brother's smile faltered for the first time. He reached for the page, but Elena held it steady. Marcus Reed leaned forward, scanning the document as she passed it around the table. Thomas Hale's expression shifted from polite interest to something sharper, more calculating. My father stared at the table, his hands clasped tightly enough that the knuckles showed white. Rebecca Lang spoke next, confirming what she had known all along. The ownership structure confirms Lauren holds the majority stake in the holding entity that has kept the company solvent. Any attempt to sideline her now would require full disclosure and could be seen as deceptive practice under the current agreements. My older brother's face went through a rapid series of changes. Disbelief, then anger, then the forced composure of a man realizing the ground had vanished beneath him. He turned to my father. "Dad, you knew about this?" My father's voice was barely above a whisper. I knew she had helped. I didn't realize the extent. The admission landed like another quiet confirmation of everything I had already accepted. Blood ties had masked the truth for years, and now the mask was gone in front of the very people whose respect my older brother had spent months cultivating. Elena Vargas continued her tone, remaining neutral, but carrying the weight of the enclave's interconnected network. I've already shared the relevant summary with the broader investor group this morning. Transparency is essential at this stage. The complaint that was filed regarding the handling of internal communications will be reviewed by the association's ethics committee as a matter of standard procedure. It ties directly to potential misrepresentation in the deal documents. Marcus Reed set the memo down. This changes things significantly. My clients expect stability, not internal power plays. We'll need 24 hours to reassess before proceeding. Thomas Hale simply nodded once. No dramatic outburst, no raised voices. Just the quiet, irreversible shift of community standing beginning to crumble. My older brother tried to recover, launching into explanations about family dynamics and temporary misunderstandings, but the damage was done. Elena Vargas and the two investors exchanged glances that said everything. The Enclave's business circle moved fast when trust fractured. By the end of the week, whispers would spread. Deals would pause. Invitations would dry up. My older brother's carefully built image as the reliable Whitaker successor would fracture under the weight of his own deceptive trust manipulation. I watched it all without satisfaction or triumph. The cold detachment held steady, shielding me from any emotional pull. When the meeting finally adjourned in strained silence, I stood up first. My older brother blocked the doorway for a moment, his voice low and urgent. "Lauren, we can fix this. Don't let one memo tear apart what we've built." were family. I looked at him the way one regards a problem that has finally solved itself. Actions prove real loyalty, Ryan. Yours have been clear for years. My father approached, then eyes pleading in the hallway after the others had filed out. Please, don't do this now. The company needs you. I need you to stay quiet about the full picture. I stopped walking, but didn't turn back fully. I've stayed quiet long enough. Blood ties mask the truth, but they don't bind me anymore. No contact, not calls, not emails, not messages through anyone else. This ends here. He opened his mouth, but I kept moving. The words felt final in the quiet corridor, the kind of boundary that leaves no room for negotiation. Rebecca caught up to me near the elevators, her voice low. Lauren, the ethics review will run its course. Your brother's standing in the enclave is going to take a hit. You don't have to carry any of this anymore. I thanked her with a single nod and stepped into the elevator alone. Mia texted me on the drive back through the winding hillside roads. Heard what happened. You finally chose yourself. Proud of you. Call if you need anything. I read it, but didn't reply right away. The secondary conflict with my trusted colleagues had resolved itself in their quiet support, but even that felt distant now. The days that followed moved in the same measured rhythm. The deal closed eventually, but under new terms that reflected the full ownership reality. My older brother's role was reduced to a figurehead position with limited authority. My father faded into the background, the complicit silence that had defined him now, costing him the respect he had once taken for granted. Word spread through the enclave's tight business network, exactly as Elena Vargas had implied it would. Invitations to key gatherings stopped arriving. Conversations at local events grew polite but brief. Community standing ruined in the quiet, relentless way these things happen among people who value stability above all. I didn't watch it unfold up close. I didn't need to. The complaint I had prepared had done its work without requiring me to lift another finger. Karma in its detached form had played out through the very systems my older brother had tried to manipulate. But for me, there was no victory lap, no triumphant return to the family fold. I simply finalized the paperwork that transferred day-to-day operations away from any lingering Whitaker involvement and stepped back completely. The evenings in my own home grew quieter than they had ever been. No more late-night strategy sessions trying to protect people who never asked for protection. No more wondering whether one more bailout would finally earn the loyalty I had given freely. The fierce, quiet independence I felt was real, but it carried the weight of isolation that no one talks about when they praise boundaries. I walked through the enclave's familiar streets alone, now nodding politely to the same neighbors who had once included me in their circles because of the family name. The name no longer opened doors. I didn't mind. The detachment that had protected me through years of silent support now protected the new space I had claimed for myself. 2 weeks after the meeting, I received a single email from my father. It was short, pleading for one conversation to clear the air. I read it once, then deleted it without replying. No contact forever confirmed. The boundary stood absolute. Blood ties had masked the truth long enough. Actions had proven exactly where real loyalty had been missing all along. I sat on my balcony that evening, the hillside lights spreading out below me, and felt the clean, unyielding strength of having finally chosen myself. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simply there, steady and fierce in its quiet independence. The lesson had settled. Deep actions prove real loyalty, and when they don't strengthen lives in the detachment, that lets you walk away without looking back. Thank you for listening to my story. Would you cut contact in a situation where blood ties masked the truth for years and actions finally showed you where real loyalty was missing?